The purpose of this video is to talk about AI use again for our research proposal project, the ways that it is completely acceptable to use AI, even though it's never a requirement, and also the things that I would warn you against, how not to use AI, the things that will get you into academic dishonesty issues. And this is probably our project that is going to offer the most ability to use AI, particularly in a brainstorming way. As I've mentioned in previous videos, we have the language in the syllabus where everybody needs to be watching these videos and understanding how AI is fine to use and how it's not. And this one's going to be one of those where there's a lot of room for AI, particularly because of this concept that I say, we don't know what we don't know. And it's like, you know what you know. You know that there are things that you don't know, like I don't know how to change the oil in my car, and I know that I don't know that. But then there's this other area of knowledge that's things that we don't even know exist as a body of knowledge, and so we don't know that we don't know them because they're just not even on our knowledge radar, right? And that's going to come up for you in this project. For example, when I ask you to design a research study. If you dig into, as we will, the ways that we could do a research study, you'll realize that, maybe you didn't even know that these were possibilities. Now you know they're possibilities and you might not know how to do them, but until you know something exists, you don't even know what you don't know. And I think that filling in that gap of knowledge is something that the AI does really well, because when we use it as a brainstorming tool, it will give us ideas that we didn't even know were possibilities. Of course, there's this beautiful conversation of if we're using AI in this way, are we limiting our ability to have creative and critical thinking? And I think that we are if we over rely on this. If going to AI is our absolute first step, then we might be challenging ourselves in the future when it comes to our own ability to think critically and creatively. But if we can kind of collaborate and say, here are all of the thoughts that I do have, here's the brainstorm that I came up with. I don't love it. What else is there? What don't I know about? Before AI existed, this is why so much of education is built off of group projects and why we have that phrase of two heads are better than one. Well, it's kind of like AI is better than 45 heads. Because there's so much content that it can just pull from, and it doesn't have feelings, right? It can give you ideas that it's not judging based on quality. It's just, here's an idea, here's another idea, here's a 45th idea. So that's kind of something that I think that we can use and deal with, but I do encourage you to consider this dilemma of how much of it is pulling from my own creative and critical opportunity for thinking. You don't want to limit your creative and critical thinking. You want to use it to enhance that. So that's kind of the main message of this, and the main educational model through which I ask you to explore your AI use in this project is make sure it's helping you enhance your critical and creative thinking and not doing the critical and creative thinking for you. You can collaborate with it, but you don't want to over rely on it. So, just keep that in mind as you're working through these stages. Now, the way that I've formatted this particular video is I have just taken each stage of the research proposal project that you find in the assignment sheet, and I'm just breaking it down on on each one of those stages, how could AI help you? There are other activities that we will do for this project, like posing a number of research questions and evaluating each one of those. So you can just kind of, apply what I'm saying here to our entire project, and not just the final research proposal submission, but the whole entire body of work that we will do for this project. So the first thing you'll do when you're writing your research proposal is you will share the question that you're asking. Now, how do you come up with a research question? Start with a topic. If you think of a giant circle, it's like this vast body of possibilities. Go ahead and narrow down your specific subject matter, like, even just the field of study. Do you want to research something scientific? Do you want to propose research for something in the field of literature? Do you want to propose research something in the field of sociology and human connection? What field are you interested in? Because, if we're talking about AI use and you just ask it for some research questions, it's gonna just pop all over the place. It's better that once you're ready to work with AI, that you have a field of study that you've already narrowed down and said, this is what I'm interested in proposing. I really like cars. I want to research something I really like. Because otherwise we fall into well, this is good enough, but there's always better than just good enough. So start with your thoughts. Pick a topic that you are interested in. And many of you have kind of been exploring this same topic throughout our semester. So you're welcome to continue with that topic. I mean, this project will give us the most robust, ability to work with some of the research that maybe we've already found, some of the ways that we already understand the research that we've already found. So you're welcome to continue working with the same research that you found, almost like creating this big across the semester project. When you are ready, if you choose, never a requirement again, to use AI, I usually am thinking of ChatGPT, but just whatever is your preference. Ask it for unique and narrow research question suggestions. Ask it for feasible research question suggestions. The more interesting, the better. For example, I had a student last semester, and I'm certain he used ChatGPT to ask for some question options, and he used these kinds of words like unique and narrow, and he got a question. It was are homeowners who mow their own lawns happier than homeowners who like hire a lawn service? And that's the type of question that I'm looking for. Is just like so narrow and so unique. Something that is, there are questions that are just way too broad and way too vast that we cannot design a research study on the question, because it's actually many questions. We would need to break that down into many questions. So you really want to find something very narrow. Putting that word, into your AI assistance, if you're going to use AI, is going to really help you. The other thing I recommend is when using this for brainstorming is ask for more suggestions than you need. Don't just say, give me a research question to use on the topic of, I don't know, SpongeBob SquarePants or whatever. Ask it for 10 research questions. Ask it for 40 research questions. The more that you can ask it for, the more that you will be required then to evaluate each question and say, does this work for the scope of this project? Does this work for my interests? Is this something that I could envision myself designing a hypothetical research study on? And as you're working with all of this, if you don't actually understand what we're doing with this assignment, you will bypass your learning. So the goal of our assignment, and you'll want to, make sure you get your eyes on that assignment sheet and you read through the details. There's a lot of additional explanation, examples, things like that in there, but you will not be able to effectively choose the suggestions that AI is giving you if you don't actually fully understand the goal of this project. So the biggest thing is to not allow it to do it for you, because you might not even know whether it's doing it correctly or it's not. And of course, you know that that's not the goal for your learning for this class. So use it, make sure you understand the assignment, and use it again in a way that's going to enhance your creative and critical thinking and not do the creative and critical thinking for you. Okay, so the next part of our research proposal is going to be writing a hypothesis. My suggestion is not to use AI just to write out the hypothesis. You know, even if you come up with the research question on your own, you use no AI assistance, I would avoid going straight to ChatGPT and saying, write a hypothesis for this, because usually the hypothesis language, it's just so flowery. Your reader, the person who's sort of maybe evaluating whether or not to fund your research proposal, it might minimize your ethos, like your credibility as a writer, if there's the evidence that the hypothesis is just inauthentic. So my suggestion is to work again with this collaboration. Start with where you are in your thinking on this, and even try to work with it to understand your own hypothesis. I love ChatGPT for this process of inquiry. It's very Socratic, and you can ask it, you know, try a prompt like, I've devised the following research question, insert your research question, ask me questions to help me discover my own hypothesis about it. Sometimes, and maybe you've experienced this, when you have this feeling about something, but you just maybe can't quite explain it, I think that AI is lovely for telling it, I have a feeling about something, not asking it to give you a response to support your feeling, but asking it to guide you through your thoughts, guide you through your thinking by only asking you questions. So then the responses that you are providing are your own true thoughts and thinking, and all it's doing is just helping you develop your own thinking. And so that would be perfect for devising a hypothesis. Instead of asking it to create one for you, why not ask it to help you create your hypothesis? And then of course, if you need some, you know, phrasing suggestions, you're like, this isn't quite sounding right, work from there. You will have a whole record of how much you've added your own input here. But that Q&A, using it as a Socratic dialogue method is a really good suggestion. Again, make sure you understand the assignment, because otherwise you may go a little off track. Okay, the other thing that we're going to do is write a literature review. Now, I accept a couple of different types of literature reviews. I accept literature reviews that look a little more like an annotated bibliography, or I accept literature reviews that are a little more interwoven, a little more synthesized. We'll talk about that when we get there. But, you know, what you're going to need is you're going to need 4 sources of research that already exists. You are fine to, you know, ask it for some suggested sources. Again, my recommendation, ask it for more sources than you need. You need 4, ask it for 8. Narrow those down, you know, check them out. Of course, always, you guys have probably had experience with this. If you're using AI for research, ChatGPT can definitely make up sources that look cited, they look great, and then you go and investigate them, and they just don't actually exist. So if you're going to use it for direct sources, make sure that you can confirm that it's a direct source, that you can go to it, because, you know, ethically, you got to read your sources. You got to read your sources. The other thing that you can do, you know, if you're like, that's giving too much power to AI. I like researching. I like that discovery. Then you can ask it maybe for some search phrase suggestions. I really want to find some articles about this. I'm really interested in knowing the type of work that's already been done on this research question. Share your research question, and ask it for some search phrases. Whether you're using Google, whether you're asking it for Boolean operator phrase suggestions, and you're using some database like ProQuest, whatever you're doing, you know, it could just help give you some possible topics for searching in terms of like specific phrases. So that's another thing that you can do. You can always ask it to, once you've written your literature review or your prior related research section, you can always ask it to proofread for clarity. Just check in that it's not doing too much rephrasing. It likes to change our language to this very robotic and flowery content it's very over academic for what we're going for. Of course, the most unethical thing that you could do with AI is just ask it to write your literature review for you. I did a couple of test runs on this, and it's giving more of annotated bibliographies than it's giving true literature reviews. You can probably work in language like synthesizing sources, using more than one source in a paragraph, but it'll do a good job if it's using accurate sources that it understands, but of course, this is completely going to bypass this mini learning of what a literature review is and how to work in, we've done these methods like cataloging our research, but what do you do with that research? This is something that you can do is write a literature review. And so if you need to know this, then you will bypass your learning by doing the most unethical thing with AI. Okay, their future research is a great place to deal with that. We don't know what we don't know, because up until this point of the project, most students totally get it. They can pose a question, they can come up with an educated guess answer, and they can find sources and summarize them and like work in a little couple paragraphs on the sources that they found. What then we get hit with is something I'm asking you for. I'm asking you to design a project that is a little bit more advanced for an English 112 class, because there are so many different ways that you can write a research study. You can focus on qualitative or quantitative design. You can focus on mixed methods. All of these things are taught heavily in grad school. You guys are in an English 112 class. So I am asking you for something that's a little bit beyond the scope of the goals of our class, but still within the goals of our class. So there's going to be a gap in where you are educationally with this concept, and some of you guys will be a little higher and some of you guys will be a little lower, and then what I am looking for. So there's a gap. We don't know what we don't know. The most ethical way to approach this with AI is to just ask it for general knowledge on different types of studies. What types of research studies are possible, asking it to just kind of quickly give you some rundowns, like, should I do a survey? Should I do walk around and ask people their thoughts like you see in TikTok videos? Would I need to be bringing a group of people to like some sort of lab to perform specific actions and then observe them through a piece of glass like you might see in a science TV show or something like that? Is the research more humanitarian based, and maybe you're looking at like global data statistics, or is the research more in the field of literature and film, and your primary sources are things like movies and books and not people. So we don't really know. There's so many possibilities. We don't know what we don't know. And asking AI for just some general content that goes beyond what I will share with you in the LMS can be a great idea. And then you can apply that general knowledge to your plans. Think, okay, I could do a survey. I could write these kinds of questions, and then ask ChatGPT for some feedback and suggestions on what you have planned. So it's sort of this like collaborative process. Something else that you can do, as long as you're careful not to over-rely, again, skipping that critical and creative thinking, is you can provide it with your research question and ask it to design a few possible studies. So again, here's this idea that you get the final say, you get to make adjustments, you have to use what you know in order to make the right choice for this project. It can give you a couple and then you can review them. Of course, just asking it to write a research study and then submitting that is going to have a number of issues. One, it's academically dishonest. Two, it's bypassing your learning, which is totally our goal. But three, this is what they will do. They'll give you this really intense, either overly intense study that, which would be a red flag. Or it's going to give you something really simplistic and not enough content. This is where, again, understanding the assignment is important, going in and looking at that example of the plan, but not the results of the study. That's going to be really important. So I would start with most ethical and level down if you are struggling. Of course, if you don't want to use AI, don't. You have enough creative and critical thinking already in your minds that you don't need it, but it can enhance based on that gap in knowledge. It can enhance particularly this section of the research proposal. Here's a place where I really don't think you need to use any AI is the research struggles. What will be the challenge in completing this research? Just take some time and think about the project that you are considering designing. There's going to be challenges, are they financial challenges? Are they logistics challenges? Are they challenges with like the participants of your study or the scope and scale of your study? If you aren't coming up with any ideas and you've given it the good college try, then yep, of course, you can ask AI for some suggestions, but again, ask for more than you need and really consider what would be the two top struggles, something like that, two or three. Again, understanding the assignment, that's going to be key. Copying and pasting the assignment sheet directly into ChatGPT and looking for a beautiful production, that might work. You might get a passing grade. Of course, it's unethical. But the other issue in this particular section is that sometimes it will suggest the things that you will run into in doing the assignment, which isn't our goal here. It's what struggles would you run into in completing the research you are proposing if you did complete the research. Okay, final product and sharing. This is the section where you're talking about what kind of work will be the output of this. Will you write a paper? Would this be some kind of documentary? Would you end up sharing your research in an infographic or something like that? It's the section that talks about who is the audience? Where would this work be published? In what citation format? And honestly, I don't think that AI is necessary. Good old-fashioned Google is great here because you get so much more discovery. Yeah, of course, ChatGPT can tell you this would be a good audience for your research. This would be a great publication journal, verifying, of course, that it's actually a real journal. But what will give you so much more value in your learning of this is going to Google and engaging with the content itself. So, for example, if you Google scholarly journals in the field of car mechanics or something like that, or trade journals in the field of car mechanics, then you'll actually be able to click on those journals and go and look at their web pages and see for yourself, does it really look like this research would fit there? Having that opportunity to engage with the platforms that you are suggesting, here's where I would publish this research, is so much better than just, getting some suggestions and then just popping those suggestions onto your submission. So Google, the old-fashioned way of Googling things, I think is going to be a much more engaging experience when it comes to responding to these last two elements. The other thing that I will always say at the end of these videos is your reflection has to be you. I still allowed written reflections in project 2, but we will see how those go, and then I may switch purely to a video or voiced reflection in the project 3. I'll let you know. Some of you are doing video or voice reflections. They're lovely. Carry on if you want to, but no AI whatsoever should be used in writing your reflection. I feel like there may be some out there that are like, ooh, is this AI generated? Is it not? If I am not wholly sure, then I won't comment on it. But truly, the reflections that are so meaningful, the reflections that show that you've really engaged with the work, the reflections that I want to read are the ones that are kind of explorative, a little bit messy. Who cares about grammar and punctuation? I mean, most of y'all have a strong handle on that stuff anyway, but the ones that are just really thinking about your own connection to the assignment, whether it's positive, you loved it, you had a great time, here's all your thoughts on that, or whether it's, quite negative. Like, I hated this project. I don't like doing this part, and here are all of my reasons. The ones that just really dig into the explanations authentically, those are the reflections I like. And it's not the longer concept that is the reason I don't want you to use AI. It's just the pure thoughtfulness of all of that. Those are the reflections I want to read. Those are the reflections that score higher than the reflections that just in a few sentences baseline answer whether authentically or not, or the reflections that are quite long and detailed but clearly are written with AI assistance to make them enhanced in some kind of way. Totally not the point. The point of the reflection is just authentic writing, and great, here's your 100 on the reflection. Not for quality per se. Which is to say that the more quality reflection is, the more authentic one. So that's truly how you do well. All right, I think that covers everything. This video is longer than I hoped it would be, but I hope this gives you some things to think about when using AI in Project 3. And if you have any questions, let me know.